Welcome back, friends. Aloha pa. We are continuing to the second half of this momentous letter of the Universal House of Justice, dated the 30th of December, 2021. This communique foreshadows an unfolding vision of the society-building power of the faith that we are called upon to release and make evident to the world. Just before we begin, I want to acknowledge the wonderful appreciation and thanks and encouragement that you have sent to all of us who contributed to the first presentation. You have made it very clear that this format that we are using has been useful to you. So I want to just review what that format is. First of all, we acknowledge that the letter is a whole vision, like the blueprint of a great ship. And therefore, the back, the front, the middle, the whole letter is equally important to us, to our implementation, because you can't build half a ship. Secondly, each section of the letter has its own vision. It conveys a specific aspect of the whole, and the Universal House of Justice has given us titles for those sections. Thirdly, within a section, each paragraph presents a particular focus within the themes of that section. So we pulled out a title for each paragraph topic using the exact language of the letter. And finally, when you yourself and your study circle look at each paragraph, you may find 17 different phrases that inspire you. But we disciplined ourselves to use only 3 or 4 that would highlight the themes in that paragraph so we could find it again. So let's do a quick review of the first half to get our momentum back. And I will do screen share so that we can do that. Right. Now, we began by acknowledging that all 7 sections address how to release the society-building power. And we went carefully through the introduction to see that the House identifies this as a new epoch in Baha'i history, indeed, in the world, when we will see capacities being developed that we haven't used before. And in that period of history, those of us who recognize the truth of the teachings of Baha'u'llah have been brought forth from nothingness for the sole purpose of applying those teachings to the resolution of the problems of the world. Now, in this history-making drama that we're all involved in, there are 3 protagonists, each of us as an individual, all of us in our communities, and those who have been called to serve particular roles within the institutions of the administrative order. The society-building power is in the institution, not in the people who pass through it, but the real power is in the institutions, the communities, and the individuals working together. And finally, we noticed in the introduction that the focus comes back to each soul. It said, each enkindled soul, because you are the candle that will light the world. Then there was a section on the movement of clusters, which we're quite familiar with in the Baha'i world, and how they develop along a continuum of 3 milestones. And then the House of Justice treated us to a vision that is being developed among the most advanced clusters in the world. These are the ones that have such a significant proportion, perhaps the majority, I don't know, but somehow a critical mass who are engaged in the community building activities together, such that the institutions and the people can see that they may have within reach the capacity to serve all of the people in that vicinity, all the children, all the junior youth, all the young adults, all the hardworking midlife adults, all the elders, because at some point the scale tips and we're able to do that. And then in the fourth section on our first day, we looked at the way Baha'is are contributing to social transformation and realized that there is a distinctive way that we do it. It's not by actually undertaking all the work ourselves, but by engaging with our co-workers for all of us to learn, raising the capacity of every person to be the active creator of their own history. Now, today, in the second section, we are going to be looking at the function of educational endeavors broadly and the continuing role of the Training Institute in particular. And there's a great deal of detail in there about how education spread throughout a population is like rain to a plant. It's what helps us grow. And then the largest section of the entire letter, the most pages, most paragraphs, this section talks about what is automatically going to happen, well, as we work at it, a raising capacity for administration in all levels of our Baha'i world order. We've been told this for years, that as large numbers came into the work of the faith, it would bring about the evolution of our administrative institutions. And finally, it's so sweet. The house embraces us in a farewell statement that says, this is a historic mission, meaning it's going to take a whole generation. So be gentle, be kind, as well as persevering, because this is more than a lifelong endeavor. So this second half about education for the whole population and transformation into a higher capacity, level of capacity for our institutions, it reminds me of the English poet Robert Browning, who said, "Grow old with me, the best is yet to be, the last for which the first was made." So this second half of the letter is the half for which the first was made. We grow our clusters so that we can bring life-giving education to all people, and so that we can improve the manner in which we manage our communities. It's not that this happens first and this happens second. No, as our clusters grow, our capacity to educate and to administer all of our activities will grow. This second half shows us what an ever-advancing civilization is going to look like. So let's carry on with our studies. So let's go take a look at it. But just before we begin on the text, I want to remind us as learners of a couple of things. First of all, this co-presentation is just a small group of Canadian friends who are trying to study this letter together. We're trying to find a way. Remember last week, we used the analogy of a great ship. This letter is like the blueprint of a great ship with many departments in it and moving pieces. But as a Canadian, I noticed that it's also like a great forest, a dense forest of ideas. So by going through the paragraphs like this, we're marking the trees so we can find a pathway through the forest. All of us will be studying parts of this letter for a very long time. And the purpose of these sessions is to help us locate which topic is in which paragraph. Now, as we get to a paragraph, the density of the embedded messages is not just a problem of language. It's because the message itself is so spiritually deep that our intellect can hardly catch it. So I suggest that today and always we begin by feeling the spirit of the message in our hearts. Start with the feeling, start with the inspiration. Then you can bring in the intellect to analyze it point by point. And most importantly, to consult about it, because by discussing it with other people, they see a paragraph from a different side and they will be able to tell us more about it. Then we have to actually exercise our imagination to try to apply the ideas we find here locally. And we are so dispersed around the room, around the world, even this small group who is here today, we're representing many countries and many localities within those countries. Then we put an idea into action. And only after we've taken action will the real meaning begin to reveal itself to us. Will we begin to understand? So be very kind and patient with ourselves as we study this letter. Now, today's half begins with his section on education. It opens a very wide horizon on educational activities that will offer learning opportunities to every single person. The first paragraph talks about the centrality of education to transformation. And then the next three will talk about the Institute. The House of Justice says, we invite you to take a more expansive view of the Training Institute. That means what we saw it do for 25 years, what we think it can do is just the beginning. The Institute can and will do much more. It spends the next paragraph talking about quality and it's sort of professional development so that every person who's involved with the Institute will begin to understand it so much better. And finally, it talks about the refinement of the educational system within Baha'i culture, and how investing in that system is the concern of every Baha'i. So let's go over now. We stop this and go over here, and we'll start reading the letter, and I think it will be Margaret who will read for us. Margaret, can you see the letter?
No.
Okay, that's a no. Okay, I have to start screen share again and go here. Now can you see it?
Yes, there we go.
Great.
The importance of education to a Baha'i conception of spiritual and social transformation can hardly be overestimated. Consider, Baha'u'llah states, the revelation of the light of the name of God, the educator. Behold how in all things the evidences of such a revelation are manifest, how the betterment of all beings dependeth upon it. The significance of education in the work of community building is unmistakable. And in the field of social action, the provision of education remains the signature contribution of Baha'is in most parts of the world. Preeminent among the structures and agencies created by the Baha'i world to offer education is, of course, the Training Institute. Indeed, the network of national and regional training institutes operating with such proficiency around the globe is among the choicest fruits of the previous series of global plans. Building capacity for service within communities by enabling ever-increasing numbers of individuals to benefit from the Institute process will continue to be a central feature of the plans in the present series. The capacity for community development that has already emerged, represented by hundreds of thousands of individuals who are able to serve as tutors, animators, or children's class teachers, is a resource of historic consequence.
Thank you so much. And now Shahram, please.
When we first introduced the concept of the Training Institute, it was in the context of the need to raise up human resources to take on the tasks of expansion and consolidation. At this juncture, when a new series of plans has just begun, we invite you to take a more expansive view. Increasingly, participation in Institute courses is preparing the friends of God for an ever deeper engagement in the life of the wider community. It is endowing them with the knowledge, insights, and the skills that enable them to contribute not only to the
recording in progress.
It is endowing them with the knowledge, insights, and skills that enable them to contribute not only to the process of developing their own community, but to the progress of society. In short, the insight is a potent means for the society building power of the faith to find release. Although the task of developing curricular materials to support this purpose is a long-term undertaking, existing materials already aim to build capacity for a broad range of initiatives. Moreover, they offer a seamless, coherent educational experience from the age of 5 upwards to the age of junior youth and through into adulthood. And they serve as a direct counterpart to the pattern of activities unfolding at the grassroots. In relation to this, we have been pleased to see the rich insights that the friends in different parts of the world, in a variety of social and cultural contexts, are generating about aspects of community development. If these insights and those still to emerge are to benefit Baha'i communities more widely, systems for the preparation and refinement of educational materials will need to be extended. With this in mind, we will soon set out the approach that will guide this work over the coming years.
Thank you. And Rhonda?
With respect to raising the capacity of institutes to deliver each of the 3 stages of the educational process, we are glad to see that attention is increasingly being given to enhancing the quality of the educational experience itself, in addition to expanding the system for its delivery. A critical requirement is to enable all those contributing to the work of the Institute to progressively advance their understanding of the educational content, its objectives, its structure, its pedagogical principles, its methodology, its central concepts, its interconnected connections. Many training institute boards have been supported in this regard by the collaborative groups described in our message to your 2015 conference. In places, separate teams have also begun to focus respectively on children's classes, junior youth groups, and study circles, identifying factors that contribute to their effectiveness and finding ways to assist the friends involved in each avenue of service to further raise their own capacity. The auxiliary board members in a region and their assistants are often the first to see to it that what is being learned reaches a wider number of friends across adjoining clusters and within centers of intense activity. Individuals with a depth of experience in the promotion of institute activities are serving as resource persons, and they have proved instrumental in helping institutes at an earlier point of development to advance. Nevertheless, in general, it is counselors who are ensuring that each institute becomes familiar with the many essential insights being generated by their sister agencies in neighboring countries and regions. Counselors have arranged for institutes to be organized into groupings of varying sizes to enable the lessons that are being learned by the most experienced institutes to be shared more widely, increasingly through the means of formal seminars. All these arrangements will need to be strengthened during the next plan. In places where a site for the dissemination of learning about the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program is operating, collaboration between the learning site and associated institutes has already proven extremely fruitful, and it should intensify. Their pursuit of a common goal and their shared desire to see clusters advance create ideal conditions for the spirit of cooperation and mutual assistance to flourish. The knowledge that has now accumulated about factors that contribute to the effectiveness of the Institute process is extensive, and we look to the International Teaching Center to organize what has been learned and make it available to you.
Thank you. Greg?
What we have described above is an educational system in a state of constant refinement. This requires many individuals to lend their support to its further development. It also requires institutes and Baha'i institutions more generally to plan ahead and ensure that individuals who have developed considerable capacity in supporting the community's educational endeavors are able to sustain their service and can, when their life circumstances change, continue to be involved in the work of the Institute in other meaningful ways. Appreciating the effectiveness of the Institute process, every follower of Baha'u'llah will feel a desire to contribute to its advancement in some way, not least the Baha'i youth. Institutes know well that releasing the potential possessed by young people is, for them, a sacred charge. We now ask that Baha'i youth view the future of the development of the Institute in the very same light. At the vanguard of a 9-year community-wide endeavor to bring the Institute to a higher level of functioning, we expect to see a broad movement of youth setting the standard. They should seize every opportunity in their schools and universities and in spaces dedicated to work, family, or social interaction to encourage more and more souls to benefit from the Institute's programs. Some youth will be able to devote a period of service, perhaps even successive years, to the provision of education, especially to those younger than themselves. For many, support for the Institute's activities will be an ever-present dimension of their lives throughout their own education and as they seek a livelihood from their calling in this world. But for none should it be anything less than a cherished commitment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, still learning to do screen share and the outline. So what did we're pausing. There's more to this section, but we're pausing because in 7 paragraphs, there's a lot. So in this first paragraph, the house shows us that education is at the heart of transformation. It says it's essential. Just as water is essential to living plants to grow, learning is essential to a living human being so that the human being keeps growing. The betterment of all beings dependeth upon it. The training institute that we've become so familiar with during the past series of plans has produced hundreds of thousands of children's class teachers, junior youth animators, and study circle tutors. So hundreds of thousands, that's a huge army of human resources. But it's very interesting that the house then says, we invite you to take a more expansive view of the Training Institute, especially if you are familiar with books 1 to 7 and see how they address the individual spiritual life and teaching. Then 8, 9, 10 move us through a huge bridge from the old world to the new, through the covenant, through this period of history, and through the new Baha'i culture of accompaniment, consultation, and thinking wider, thinking of the Institute. So it's not just cluster, thinking wider, thinking of the cluster. So it's not just expansion and consolidation of the Baha'i community. When we get to books 11, 12, 13, 14, we see that an ever deeper engagement in society, in the community, in the progress of the entire society, as the Tarbiyat schools did at one time, welcoming Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Baha'is into state-of-the-art schools. Now the Institute is addressing social change. So already existing materials in that 11, 12, 13, 14 support social action. But it's really important indication that the House says to us, we know you people are busy doing things around the world and learning about social change. And we want to be able to gather together all of those learnings about how you develop agents of social change. So we want to draw on your insights to create new curriculum materials. And that paragraph ends with the House telling us, we'll give you the plan later, we'll give you the process for inputting your insights to a bigger curriculum development operation. So something more will be coming as foreshadowed there. Now, the next chapter in talking about quality focuses us on actually 6 themes. All of us who've had anything and continue to have anything to do with the Institute need to get a better understanding of 6 things. Objectives of the Institute, structure of the courses, the pedagogical paradigm being followed, the teaching learning methods, the central concepts that create this architecture of concepts, and then the interaction of the whole business. So all of us can look forward to gaining a deeper understanding of how this works. It's already been happening through teams, auxiliary board members, and assistants. It's very nice to see that the Continental Board of Counselors, the counselors who have the freedom of movement through all the countries of their continent, they're like the bees that take an idea from here to there. They can take an idea from one country to another and so advance us all quickly. But in the end, it rolls up to the International Teaching Center, which is monitoring how we are progressing with the Institute around the world. And we'll be able to turn to the Institute the International Teaching Center in due course when it has organized and then can disseminate all this wonderful learning that's going on around the world to us. But as you could expect, it always comes down to each individual soul, the concern of every Baha'i. You know, so many universities in the world were started by religious traditions. Universities have been started by various churches, and Muslim universities are world famous and so on. But the Baha'i world is beginning to grow something that will become the state of the art for the dynamic coherence of spiritual and material forces. The Baha'i world is growing these educational processes. And once you've tasted it, once you've been involved, you can continue to support the Institute lifelong, especially the youth whose whole worldview has been formed by active engagement with their community, as the junior youth program teaches them to do. The Institute sees these precious junior youth as sacred. They've been entrusted to us, these junior youth, just before their lives take off. And now the House is asking that those youth who are now in their 20s and 30s and have been formed will reciprocate that loving care and will remember to give back and stay involved with their alma mater. You know, alma mater means mother, but it means fostering mother, the mother who raised us. So youth can bring the Institute to a higher level everywhere they go. Now, having spent these paragraphs on the Institute, The whole idea of educational processes broadens out again. And the concluding paragraphs on education talk about all forms, including career development. So whether these youth are going on to apprenticeships in trades and technologies or university studies, we as a community have the responsibility to care for our young adults. After junior youth and youth come young adults, the ones who are taking on their professional and family life. And then paragraph 26, you'll love paragraph 26, because it talks about Baha'u'llah's stupendous revelation and how we have an engagement with it lifelong. That paragraph never uses the word deepening, but we know that when you go back again and again and again to the sacred writings, that's what this paragraph is talking about. And finally, we need to watch for those in our community who have that intellectual rigor and the clarity of thought that they can tell the rest of the world, whether it's engineering or agriculture or economy or environment, they can talk to the rest of the world and explicate Baha'i principles, how the Baha'i principles help put each of those fields of endeavor right. Explicate is an interesting word. It doesn't mean just explain. It means to unfold one layer of meaning after another layer of meaning. So let's now look at the words of the house and ask our team to read again for us. I think this is Margaret. Margaret, can you see it?
Not yet.
Oh dear, I still haven't learned how to do this. I go to screen share and I open this. Now can you see it?
Yes, indeed.
Ah, okay, sorry.
No problem. In many parts of the world, a natural outcome of the participation of individuals and families in the institute process has been an increased consciousness of the importance of education in all its forms. Friends serving as children's class teachers take a keen interest in the broad educational development of those they teach. While friends serving as tutors and animators are naturally concerned with the extent to which those approaching or entering adulthood, girls and boys alike, can access and benefit from education of many kinds, not limited to the courses offered by the Institute itself. For instance, they can encourage young people to look towards apprenticeships or university studies. We have been struck by how, in many communities, engagement in the Institute process by large numbers has gradually reshaped this aspect of culture within a population. The institutions of the faith will need to take responsibility for ensuring that, as consciousness is raised in this way, the noble aspirations that arise in young people as a result, aspirations to acquire the education and training that will allow them to offer a lifetime of meaningful service to their society, can be fulfilled. The long-term development of a community, and ultimately of a nation from generation to generation, depends to a large degree on the effort made to invest in those who will assume responsibility for collective social progress.
Thank you. And now Shahram.
This exploration of the centrality of education to a community founded on Baha'i principles would be incomplete without a further observation. Shoghi Effendi has laid great stress on the importance of striving through constant endeavor to obtain a more adequate understanding of the significance of Baha'u'llah's stupendous revelation. The Training Institute has no parallel as an instrument for the systematic exposure of limitless numbers of souls to the life-giving waters of the revelation and the inexhaustible meaning of the Word of God. But the Friends' efforts to increase their understanding of the faith and its teachings are of course not limited to participation in the institute process. Indeed, one strong indicator of an institute's effectiveness is the thirst it cultivates within those who engage with its materials to continue to study the cause of Baha'u'llah, individually, but also collectively, whether in formal spaces created by the institutions or in more informal settings. Beyond the study of the revelation of itself, beyond the study of the revelation itself, the implications that the teachings hold for countless fields of human endeavor are of great importance. A notable example of one form of education through which young believers are becoming better acquainted with a Baha'i perspective on issues relevant to the progress of humanity is participation in the seminars offered by the Institute for Studies in Global Prosperity. Given the vastness of the ocean of the revelation, it will be apparent that exploring its depth is a lifelong occupation of every soul who would tread the path of service.
Thank you. And Rhonda.
As the contribution being made by the faith to the progress of society in different parts of the world gains greater visibility, the Baha'i community will increasingly be called upon to explicate the principles it advocates and to demonstrate their applicability to the issues facing humanity. The more the intellectual life of a community blossoms and thrives, the greater its capacity to answer this call. It will be up to the followers of Baha'u'llah to provide, in the world of ideas, the intellectual rigor and clarity of thought to match their commitment to spiritual and material progress in the world of deeds.
Right, thank you. So now I go to screen share and open this one. So what did we just hear? We heard that education in all forms, including this, can you see the outline? Okay. Yes. Including apprenticeships and university studies and other kinds of things that prepare people for their careers. We need, and we will, our communities will encourage all our young people to become the best they can be as servants of the world, as it says, what they're called to give to the world. So the institutions, which means not the institute, but the local spiritual assemblies, the regional assemblies, the encouragement of the auxiliary board members, any of our institutions may be involved in nurturing the noble aspirations of our youth. And the whole community depends on investment in youth. Do notice that word investment. It's poetic, but it could also be financial. Now, the next paragraph talks about the study of Baha'u'llah's revelation and how we know we can never get to the end of it. And the more that we immerse ourselves in it, the more it supports our spiritual life, but also our work in countless fields of endeavor. So ISGP is an agency that has been supporting university students to think about applying the principles of the faith in all of their career activities. And it's available online. We can all read about that. Finally, this last piece about the finely tempered sword, that the intellectual life must strive so that there are Baha'is who can speak to the state of the art of every field in the world and show how the principles of the Baha'i faith help to advance the state of the art. So what's in the next section? We come to the one that we've all been waiting for. Why have we been waiting for it? Because you always save the best to last. This section says, that effective Baha'i administration will be essential to the release of the society-building power of the faith. Society-building power is the central theme of this letter. How we're going to get there includes this final whole section, which, by the way, has the most pages, the most paragraphs, the most words of any section. Does that tell us something about the importance of raising capacity for administration at all levels? This word, it doesn't say that effective administration will be helpful to society building. It doesn't say it will enhance society building. It says it's essential. It's of the essence. So our auxiliary board members and assistants are already helping in the development of the capacities within local spiritual assemblies, but the House turns to the continental councillors and says to them, you are the ones who will help national spiritual assemblies and regional Baha'i councils raise up more and more assemblies in areas where there are people actively involved that haven't yet elected their assembly of 9 to help with the decision-making, the guidance, the coordination of that community. Paragraph 31, I shouldn't tell you, but I have to. It's one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole letter, because unlike the rest of the world, the Baha'i faith does not exalt the elected. In fact, I've even seen Baha'is who are experienced say to somebody who's been elected, congratulations and condolences, because it's hard to be a member of an elected institution. What the Baha'i faith glorifies is the elector, the soul that is choosing to put forward someone to act on behalf of the community. The sacred nature of the Baha'i electoral process is one of the most distinguishing features of our culture. And then the House surprises us, or most of us who haven't seen it, with a 2-stage electoral process that apparently you may be among those who've already done this, but it's happening in 22 LSAs in 8 countries. And the letter says in the forthcoming plan, which means this plan, the 9-year plan that will begin at Rizwan, there are going to be many more localities that are authorized to have a 2-stage electoral process. So let's go take a look at the exact words of the House. And this will be Greg.
It's not displayed yet.
Oh dear. I was so sure I did it right that time. Now?
There we go. Okay. Raising capacity for administration at all levels. 80 years ago, a letter written on behalf of the Guardian described Baha'i administration as the first shaping of what in future will come to be the social life and laws of community living. Today, at the beginning of the 2nd century of the formative age, the shape of Baha'i administration has developed considerably, and its continued development will be essential for the release of the society-building power of the faith.
Thank you. Margaret.
The administration of the faith at the grassroots is, of course, intimately connected with the development of local spiritual assemblies. These nascent houses of justice are described by Shoghi Effendi as the chief sinews of Baha'i society, as well as the ultimate foundation of its administrative structure. And he greatly emphasizes the importance of their formation. In 1995, we called for the reinstitution of the practice that required all local assemblies, including those being newly formed, to be elected on the first day of Rizwan rather than at any other time of year. This development was related to the fact that while believers from outside a locality could assist with the electoral process, The primary responsibility for electing any assembly and maintaining its operations rests with the Baha'is of that place. Much depends on their readiness for undertaking administrative activity. It has been seen in recent years how a sense of Baha'i identity can gradually gain strength in an area as a pattern of action grounded in the teachings becomes established among individuals and families living there. Thus, a community will often have attained a certain level of capacity in relation to community building endeavors by the time the formation of a local assembly becomes possible. As this point approaches, and it should not be unduly delayed, efforts have to be made to cultivate an appreciation of the formal aspects of community life associated with Baha'i administration. The local assembly that emerges in such a milieu is likely to be well aware of its responsibility to encourage and strengthen those activities which help to sustain a vibrant community. However, it will also need to gain proficiency in discharging a wide range of other responsibilities, and the support provided to it by your auxiliaries and their assistants will be vitally important. In our message to your 2010 conference, we described the developmental path of such an assembly, and we referred to various dimensions of its functioning that would need to receive attention, including its ability to manage and develop a local fund, and in time to support initiatives of social action, and to interact with agencies of local government and civil society. The benefits that accrue to a community being served by such an assembly need no elaboration.
Thank you. Shahra?
Interactions with national spiritual assemblies and regional Baha'i councils, we ask that you devote attention to the matter of establishing local spiritual assemblies and consolidating their operations, especially in areas where this aspect of growth may have received less emphasis. We anticipate this will contribute to a rapid rise in the number of local assemblies formed year on year. In some countries, your consultations will need to include consideration of whether in rural areas, existing arrangements for defining the boundaries of each locality are adequate.
Okay, and Rhonda.
One compelling insight which has emerged is that the extent to which the station and leadership of a local assembly is recognized in a community is related to how deeply the believers appreciate the sacredness of the electoral process and their duty to participate in it, in an atmosphere wholly free from the taint of suasion or worldly attitudes about power. As consciousness is raised in a community about the spiritual principles underlying Baha'i elections, a new conception is formed of what it means for someone to be called to serve on an institution, and an understanding grows of how the individual, the community, and the local assembly and its agencies relate to one another. Where systematic effort has been made to stimulate conversations in a community about the formation of the local assembly and its purpose, and to sustain those conversations year after year, the strength of the elected body and the dynamism of community life reinforces each other.
And Greg.
This reciprocal effect has been especially noticeable over the last 2 years in places where we have approved the adoption of a 2-stage electoral process for a local spiritual assembly, an approach which traces its origins to instructions given by Abdu'l-Baha to the Spiritual Assembly of Tehran. 22 local assemblies spread over 8 countries have already begun to be elected by this method during this period. Similar in many respects to the election of a national spiritual assembly, it involves the division of a locality into units from each of which one or more delegates are elected, after which the delegates elect the members of the local assembly. As the number of Baha'is residing in the locality grows large, and the community's capacity for managing complexity increases, the case for implementing a two-stage electoral process becomes commensurately stronger. Accordingly, in the coming plan, we expect to authorize the adoption of this method for electing a local assembly in many more places, both urban and rural, where conditions make such a step timely.
All right. Thank you so much. So we go from screen share to the outline. Right, so most of this section is focused on local spiritual assemblies, how we get them and who helps them. So we know that this is the embryonic pattern of future social life, where there is a relationship between the electors and the elected in a living community. You know, if each locality is like a cell in the body of the world, a living cell around our locality, the people of our locality elect the nucleus of our cell. And it's the nucleus that enables all of the other life-giving processes to operate in our cell, in our community. It summarizes different actors. So it's all about the local spiritual assemblies, but who's helping them? The ABMs and the assistants. One of the things that's in this paragraph is that the way our junior youth and youth have been active, there are many more people involved in community building endeavors than are formally enrolled within the Baha'i community. They love the Baha'i principles. They love the Baha'i people. They want to be engaged in social development. But it's important. And it says, do not unduly delay this process to cultivate an awareness of the formal aspects of community life. What it means to have a local spiritual assembly that loves and guards and cares for the community, and in response to which the community follows the guidance, implements the priorities as determined by the assembly through consultation. And it's really important in this letter that you'll notice the House turns our attention back to the 2010 letter to the international counselors and to the 2015 letter to the international counselors. So we'd be good to pull those things up and see what they were promoting at that stage of development of the cause and why it's important for us to remember it now. It's the counselors that are going to help bring about a considerable rise in the number of assemblies. And then there was that wonderful paragraph on the sacred nature of the electoral process, so that we get this dynamism, this reinforcing mutual aid between the entire community and its assembly, and assembly in the community. Such that Mr. Foratan said at one point, the 19-day feast when the community and the assembly meet together is a parliament. He was quoting Shoghi Effendi in this interview when he said, the feast is a parliament. And so stay tuned till we see how many of us will be engaged in a two-stage electoral process for our local spiritual assemblies. Now, the second half of this section kind of moves beyond the focus on the assembly itself to other actors, other institutions. The LSA is going to be offering systematic support to individuals and teams who are involved in complex lines of action. In turn, the NSAs and RBCs are going to be offering systematic support to the LSAs and their officers. That means professional development for secretaries and treasurers and others with special assignments. So growth is promoted by regional councils But here is something that many of us have not seen, a National Growth Committee. And I apologize in advance. Please make note to yourself that the outline you will receive that was PDF'd before I noticed the error contains an error that I made. I got my acronyms mixed up because I'm used to saying NSA, RBC, ATC. I'm not used to saying NGC, and it will not apply to Canada because we already have regional Baha'i councils, and it will probably not apply, I can't see it, to the US because it already has regional Baha'i councils. But in many, many countries of the world, they will not need regional division. But the House says you must, you, the NSA of that country, you must appoint a National Growth Committee. And that paragraph on the National Growth Committee shows that it will have a lot of latitude to fulfill its mission. So please make a special note about paragraph 35 that Elaine made a mistake. And there are places where I put RBC, I should have put NGC, National Growth Committee. Finally, it reminds us of the special function of the auxiliary boards for propagation and protection. And then this is the paragraph that makes me laugh. And when we get there, you'll see why it makes me laugh. So let's go read it. I close this and then open this. And it's going to begin with Margaret at paragraph 33. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Margaret.
A local spiritual assembly maintains a keen interest in learning how best to advance the community building work within its jurisdiction. And as such, it consults regularly with friends involved in coordinating endeavors in the cluster. It follows closely the development of any centers of intense activity in the locality, especially by offering support to the teams of believers who have emerged there and are stimulating the process of growth. In general, the more the intensification of activity requires organizational arrangements at the level of the locality or in parts of the locality, say arranging campaigns of home visits, accompanying families who are holding devotional meetings, or encouraging them to form groups to work together, the more prominent the role that can be assumed by the local assembly in this regard. In localities where large numbers are being welcomed into the embrace of Baha'i activities, and where the complexity of an assembly's work and manifold responsibilities is increasing, the assembly sometimes finds that its secretary needs to be supported by a staffed office, and eventually the need for a befitting local Hazrat al-Quds becomes more pressing.
Thank you, Shahram.
As local assemblies begin to take on a greater and greater share of responsibility for nurturing the development of the community, institutions at the regional and national levels must become more systematic in their efforts to support them. We have been pleased to see this need being addressed in methodical ways, for instance, by national assemblies or regional councils convening periodic meetings with the secretaries and other officers of local assemblies to consult about the unfoldment of specific lines of action.
And Rhonda.
Where a regional council has developed an enhanced capacity for administration, including an ability to provide appropriate kinds of support to many clusters at once, this has been conducive to the accelerated progress of the whole region. Our message to your 2015 conference indicated that in smaller countries where the establishment of regional councils is not required, a formal structure would need to emerge at the national level, which would be charged with helping clusters to advance. We ask that in countries where this has not yet occurred, you now consult with national assemblies about the steps that can be taken to appoint that formal structure, namely a National Growth Committee with 3 5, or 7 members. The National Assembly will need to give this agency the necessary latitude to foster the movement of clusters, drawing relevant insights from what has been learned about regional councils in this regard. Its responsibilities can include appointing area teaching committees and encouraging them in their plans, arranging for the deployment of frontline pioneers, supporting teaching projects, and distributing core literature. The committee will benefit from being able to collaborate closely with the Training Institute, itself an agency of the National Assembly, and with the auxiliary board members serving the country. And it will also be able to communicate directly with the relevant counselor. While a National Assembly will naturally wish to maintain an ongoing familiarity with the work of the committee and provide it with guidance, support, and encouragement, creating an entity that is wholly occupied with promoting growth should enable an assembly to give greater attention to other important matters. In countries where councils have not been formed, but could be established eventually, a National Growth Committee should also be appointed at this time.
Right. And then Greg. Greg, I don't know how you always got the paragraphs that go over pages.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. As the spiritual energies released by earnest pursuit of the planned surge, they meet resistance from the countervailing forces that hold humanity back from attaining full maturity. In the face of such forces, the vitality of the various lines of action being followed at the local level needs to be preserved and fortified. This critical responsibility is of special relevance to the members of the 2 auxiliary boards, whose numerous demanding duties keep them closely connected to conditions at the grassroots and alert to anything that might affect the spirit of a community. Across different cultures and social environments, they must assist the friends to face different kinds of challenges, to help previously antagonistic groups find unity through the pursuit of a common goal, to learn to put aside inherited customs and attitudes that belong to humanity's period of adolescence, and to overcome prejudices of all kinds, to guard against any tendency to view matters with cynicism or an eye for faults, and instead sustain an eager and constructive outlook, to put the equality of women and men into practice, and to cast off inertia and apathy through the exercise of individual initiative, to put one's support of plans for collective action before feelings of personal preference, to harness the power of modern technologies without succumbing to their potentially enervating effects, to prize the sweetness of teaching the faith and the joy of serving humankind above worldly interests, to reject the opiate of consumerism, to turn away from materialistic ideologies and the worldviews they aggressively promote, and fix one's gaze upon the bright beacon that is the laws and principles of God. These, and many more besides, constitute a formidable set of responsibilities for the company of the faithful to fulfill as they navigate what are sure to be tumultuous years in the life of humanity. Your auxiliaries, who have so creditably acquitted themselves in advancing the process of entry by troops, must be equal to all such challenges whenever and wherever they arise. Throughout the power of their good example and the clarity of their good counsel, may they help the friends to grow in faith, assurance, and commitment to life of service, and accompany them as they build communities that are havens of peace, places where a harried and conflict-scarred humanity may find shelter.
Thank you. And the last paragraph is Margaret.
Mute. Over the last series of plans, the community's capacity to maintain focus on the faith's most pressing needs emerged as one of its most important strengths. However, this sense of focus has to accommodate many lines of action, all of which must advance without being in competition. This calls for an expanded vision, a nuanced understanding of coexisting imperatives, added flexibility, and heightened institutional collaboration. We are conscious that the faith's resources are finite, and individuals experience many demands on their time. But as the plan unfolds in a given place and the ranks of those who are willing to serve swell, the varied aspects of a rich and vibrant Baha'i community life will advance in step, and the society-building power of the faith shine forth.
Thank you. And now going over to here. Can you see the outline? Woohoo! Okay, good. All right. All right. So LSAs are going to be keeping their eye on the ball where there are complex lines of action. This consulting regularly with friends who are coordinating across the cluster refers to what we sometimes call cluster agencies, the institute coordinators, the area teaching committee, assistants who are assigned perhaps to special populations, language groups. We have language groups, Arabic, Chinese, that go across local spiritual assembly areas and are throughout the cluster. So all of these agents who are coordinating activities across the cluster are in communication with the LSA. The LSA is keeping its eye on centers of intense activity and the teams there, but it's also got to keep its eye on the broader community and taking care of it. So we're moving into an era where it may not be just the 9 who have been elected, but we may need help at the local level. A proper office and site of holy work, the Hazrat al-Hoods, and an office staff. Now, the rest of it talks about other actors around the local spiritual assemblies, that it will be the national assemblies and the regional councils that offer support to LSAs and their officers. We talked about that. And here's the one that I didn't understand, the place of national growth committees in countries where it's not reasonable to expect a regional council, that these national growth committees will help clusters advance, that they will learn who do they turn to for peers. They turn to the regional Baha'i councils in other large countries because these national growth committees will be doing the same work. The national growth committees will support ATCs, home front pioneers, the ones who are working in their own countries, teaching projects and distributing core materials. And the National Growth Committee works with the Institute, which is also a national agency, auxiliary board members. But it was interesting to me that the National Growth Committee, although it's an agency of the National Spiritual Assembly in a given country, can reach out directly to the Continental Counselor, the counselor most frequently assigned to them by the Continental Board of Counselors, because, and this sounds like it's foreshadowing something, that these national spiritual assemblies in smaller countries that do not have regional councils, these national assemblies may have been preoccupied with teaching and expansion and consolidation, but they are now going to be freed up to do other work. So you have to ask yourself, what is that other work? For example, is it external affairs, speaking to the national government? Is it working on the acquisition of properties and the construction of houses of worship? So that's kind of like an open space right there, freeing up the NSAs for other kinds of work. The auxiliary boards, God bless them all, are there to help us in our various cultures put aside certain things. Certain things are over because they belong to the period of adolescence of our growing national cultures. The auxiliary boards are there to help us sustain certain things. Our vitality, our enthusiasm. They're there to support us when we take action, both collective and individual, to help our cultures purify themselves of things that have been contaminating and distracting us. These auxiliary boards are there to help us grow our cultures in faith, to create havens of peace for all. So let us pray for our auxiliary boards and their assistance, because they are charged with heavy responsibilities. Now you may wonder, why did I laugh at paragraph 37, which sounds so serious? Because it tells us that in this new period, beginning with the 9-year plan and moving on, it will embrace many lines of action simultaneously, and they will all be important. We have to have an expanded vision of coexisting imperatives. Okay, so this is where we have a traffic jam of priorities. An imperative is not just a priority. An imperative is a command. It's an order. It's like, oh, this is important. I have to do this. But over here, there's another imperative. That's important. I have to do that. And then there's another one. So the House is saying, prepare yourself for coexisting imperatives. I laughed because it was like the House saying, get over it. This is the way it's going to be. Put on your big boots and get ready to take on this multifaceted activity. The exigencies of this age are many. And in the heightened collaboration of institutions with each other, we'll begin to see how a Baha'i community can shine forth. So get used to it. This is the way it's going to be. Now, the last section is very comforting and consoling and kindly when the House says, stay calm and carry on. This is a generational activity, which means some of us, like me, are not likely to see the end of it. Do I care? No. What's important to me in the rest of my life is that I'm here on the job while this is happening, because what we're about is raising up a divine civilization, the kingdom of God on earth, a society that works according to benevolent laws of justice and prosperity for all. This is the primary mission of the Baha'i faith. And then the House says that it will implore Baha'u'llah to make each one of us an ever more perfect channel. This phrase, ineffable, it means the grace of God is so great that we have no human words to express it. So let's go look at the writing of the House. And this will be Shahram.
A historic mission. We hope to have impressed upon you in these pages that the present-day capacity of the Baha'i community, combined with the discipline it has achieved through adherence to a coherent framework for action, has prepared it for an extensive, rigorous test of all its resources, spiritual as well as material. The plan that will shortly commence, the first major undertaking in a sacred 25-year venture, generational in its scope and significance, will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demands that the Guardian made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. If by the grace of Almighty God, the Friends should succeed in reaching the heights of heroism to which they are now summoned, history will assuredly pay tribute to their actions in terms no less glowing than those with which it honors the glorious deeds that decorate the annals of the first century of the formative age.
Thank you. Rhonda?
We put great reliance on you and on the National Spiritual Assemblies to ensure that, in all the efforts made to acquaint the Friends with the nature of this collective enterprise, this perspective of history is kept fully in view. The civilization of today, for all its material prowess, has been found wanting, and the verdict has been issued by the Supreme Pen. Know ye not that we have rolled up that which the people possessed and have unfolded a new order in its place? The establishment of divine civilization is, in the words of the Guardian, the primary mission of the Baha'i faith. It is to be built upon the most fundamental qualities, ones for which the world stands in great need: unity, trustworthiness, mutual support, collaboration, fellow feeling, selflessness, commitment to truth, a sense of responsibility, a thirst to learn, the love of an all-embracing heart.
How we long to see humanity illumined with the love of its Lord. How we long to hear his praise on every tongue. Knowing the ardency of our wish, you know then the emotion with which, when we lay our heads on the most holy threshold, we implore Baha'u'llah to make you, and all who cherish his precious faith, ever more perfect channels of his ineffable grace, the Universal House of Justice.
Thank you. So, in its closing remarks, the House tells us that this is a generational series of plans we are embarking on, of a scale reminiscent of the 10-year crusade, which you will remember placed a Baha'i in every country and territory in the world. But now we will be opening up, since there are national spiritual assemblies there, all these other aspects of the society building power. And it will be a rigorous test for us, both spiritually and materially. So we are summoned in this second century, 2022 and onward, to heights of heroism like the first century that began 2021-22. This divine civilization is our mission, and it will take these spiritual qualities to bring it about. I want to go back then to, I want to go to the outline. Where is that? And quickly remind us what we've covered today. First of all, we looked at how this expansive view of education is going to refresh and gladden the hearts of every Baha'i. Learning is to a human soul as rain is to a flower. It refreshes and gladdens us. Each of us, every day is a day of learning for each one of us. We're going to see more from the Training Institute. We're all going to have professional development within the Training Institute so that we bring more to it. Every one of us is going to be involved in supporting it somehow, somehow. Give to one of the activities, the children's classes, or give to the junior youth, or improve my own number of institute study circles. Somehow there's a place for all of us. and that we watch our children, junior youth, and young adults grow into their agencies in the world. And it's our responsibilities as a community to show our love and support to all of those young adults, because they are about to carry forward the society building work. This is the one for us to continue deepening. And this is the one where we support our agents and advocates who can speak to the state of the art in every professional area of endeavor. They can bring Baha'i principles to improve the state of the art in every field of activity. Under administration, we saw that there was a lot of attention on the local spiritual assemblies, but there are many, many actors in the Baha'i world order. Councilors, national assemblies, regional assemblies, and down here, the national growth committees. Our electoral process, which has always been sacred, is going to change for some of us into a two-stage one. And the complexity of all of these growing aspects. Remember, social and economic development was with us right from the time of Baha'u'llah. Hukukullah has been with us from the beginning. So there's nothing actually new. It's just becoming more. And the auxiliary boards are there to help us all maintain our courage, the strength of our heart, our inspiration, to protect and strengthen, fortify the vitality of the community. Let us pray for our auxiliary board members and their assistants, because their tasks are heavy. This is the one that made me laugh because of the many lines of action simultaneously, the coexisting imperatives. Get used to it. We came here, we were born, we came here with the teachings of Baha'u'llah precisely to do this at this time, to apply the teachings to heal the ills that are besetting the world. So I want to remind you that reading this letter is not actually an intellectual exercise. It's important to come to it with our hearts. And to help open our hearts, we've already used a couple of images. One of the images was that of a great ship. So you have to see the blueprint of the ship front to back, stem to stern, because it's got many departments in it and many moving parts. I also mentioned earlier today that this letter is also like a great dense forest where we're marking out a path. The most important thing you can probably take away from these two sessions is to know which paragraphs contain which topics and ideas, so that at the teachable moment, when you really need it in your community, you'll know which paragraph to go to. I want to leave you with two more images. One is like this letter is like a multi-layered map for urban development. And our beloved Annie-Joëlle Urvi, who's watching from France, knows everything about urban development. And she will appreciate that I appreciate what's involved, that some of our cities will already have maps that start with the rivers and the elevations and the coastlines. And then you've got another transparency that comes over that shows roads and bridges and tunnels. And then you've got another transparency comes over and it shows zones. This is a commercial zone, an industrial zone, a residential zone, a mixed zone. And then another one that comes over with cultural aspects like historic sites, children's parks, theaters, concert halls, art galleries, planetariums, science centers. All of that, each one is nice in itself, but when you put the whole thing together and look down through it, you see the fullness and the richness of human community life. And the Baha'i faith has been brought to this planet by Baha'u'llah so that we would learn to cultivate this garden so that it works harmoniously, peacefully, prosperously. Now, this complexity, if we look at it with our minds, may be daunting, but I want to remind us all that we can look at it like a flower. Remember that explicate means to unfold different layers of meaning. As we read this letter, it unfolds in our understanding like a great chrysanthemum or a great peony. Yes, it's complex, but it's beautiful. And furthermore, it's alive. And furthermore, it's whole. It's a unity. And furthermore, we live in it. We're living in this chrysanthemum, this divine civilization that is forthcoming. So before we get to questions, I just want to close the presentation with this blessing. O thou provider, send down thine aid, that each one gathered here may become a lighted candle, that each one may become a center of attraction, that each one a summoner to the heavenly realms, till at last we make this netherworld the mirror image of thy paradise. Abdul Baha. Thank you for being here and for making this possible.